Hey everyone, Jake here from Made for the Range, back on the Made for the Range YouTube channel. And today I'm at Sub 70's fitting headquarters here in Sycamore, Illinois, yet again to test out some brand new Sub 70 equipment. These are the new TAIII MB version 2 and the brand new TAIII CB, which is really cool addition to the TA family. There was a lot of players that loved the TA look and feel with a little bit of a unique design that we'll touch on in a second here, but the CB brings a little bit more forgiveness into play and is also really great for players that may want to combo, particularly at the top end of the bag, which hopefully we'll see in the bay once we jump in for testing here. But we're gonna run through these. I've got the TAIII MB and the TAIII CB in pitch 7 and 5. So we're gonna hit a few shots with each of them, and then we'll compare that data, and I'll talk to you guys about the design of these clubs, kind of who they're meant for, and why they might be good for your bag. All right, so we're gonna start off here with the TAIII MB version 2. We're gonna start off with the pitching wedge of this one. Really cool kind of industrial design for the TA series. A couple things that makes them a little bit unique. There's a little bit more offset than you would visually see from most MBs on the market, which is purposeful. That's actually sort of an old school way of thinking, which I think it's kind of cool that TA is sort of keeping that tradition into the irons that he's helping design. A lot of the old school guys, or the guys that you've seen on the tour in the past, they actually liked having a little bit of offset. So for them, it was more about how their lie angle and their offset worked together to make sure that they had the right start line and they were working the ball consistently. So really cool that that kind of brought its way into a modern design. Pre-worn leading edge here on all of these, and the sole is actually a little bit bigger than you would probably think it would be for something like this package. So they're a little bit easier to hit than you would probably expect. It's not a super aggressive design. It's not a super scary design by any means. So we're gonna work with them. I've got the black finish here in the MBs, starting with the pitching wedge. We'll just hit a couple balls and then we'll move on throughout the rest of our testing. I'm using TailorMade TB5X golf balls for all of this testing. I've got these built up with KBS Money Taper 120 shafts, Super Stroke S-Tech grips on everything as well. All right, pretty good group of data there. Now I'm gonna work with the TAIII CB. This one is brand new. There was no CB in version 1, so really cool to bring this into the lineup. It's the same relative design, a little bit wider of a sole, a little bit lower of a center of gravity, and just a touch more offset in these. It's still got that big pre-worn leading edge to get into the turf really nicely, and then the same materials and the same concepts behind the club, just with a little bit more help. So when we get to the top end of the bag and we test those 5 irons, we're probably gonna see more of a difference than we are with these, but we're gonna go through and test them side by side with the MBs. So this is the TAIII CB pitching wedge. We'll hit a couple balls, and then we're gonna move through the rest of the bag. I'll hit the 7 irons and the 5 irons. As always, if you guys wanna see all of the swings that are included, the data we talk about at the end, go to the end of the video or just watch the entire video, and I put all the raw swings with the data at the very end of the video, just so I don't have to bore you guys now, making you watch, 30 something swings. So fast forward to that if you want to see all of that raw data. Otherwise, we're gonna hit these a little bit, and then I'll jump behind the computer and show you guys the differences between the two clubs. It doesn't, even getting up to the 7 iron here, it doesn't look as scary as I would think. I know that the 5 iron definitely looks a little bit scarier in the MB, just a little bit smaller, really thin top lines, but I think players that like the look of something smaller, you feel like you can work it more, you feel like you can kind of go after the ball a little bit more and take those divots. It's a really nice looking package. And again, we've got that big pre-worn leading edge, which is super helpful getting down into the golf ball, especially for somebody like me. I'm usually at, I'm at 7 down right now, so it's definitely a big help. move into the CB now, you can definitely see the difference for sure, especially in that top line. The top line on the MB is a lot thinner, and it kind of hides that backside a lot better. It's a little bit more rolled off on the top as well. The blade length to me seems very, very similar. And then again, you can definitely tell there's just a tiny bit more offset in this CB as well. That felt hammered. A little thin on that one. All right, so as we move into the 5-iron here, you definitely start to see some of that blade mentality come in. It's definitely a very, very small top line. Again, it's rolled off really well too, so it looks smaller than it actually is, which again, is gonna be something preferred for the better player who wants to look at a smaller package and feel like they're in ultimate creative control of that iron. So really cool stuff here. Let's see if I deserve to hit these though. Oh, it felt really good. It sure does go a long way, doesn't it? Yeah, I think that'll do it. Those are some really, really good numbers out of a 5-iron. All right, let's switch to the CB. So just initially, this is making the MB look even smaller than what it was in my head. That thing has no right to be as good as it just was with how it looks, I'll tell you that, because now that I see this CB, which is still a small package, that guy is close to knifey. But I'm excited to see what the CB does now after that with the MB. Oh my goodness. So if I'm being honest, those didn't feel the best. Like, I don't feel like I hit those out of the middle, and I really got away with it. These are they're a touch firmer than the MB are, for sure. The MB feels a little bit softer. But I don't feel like I deserved either one of those. That was out of the middle. All right, that was a very good test. So let's hop behind the computer and we'll jump into the Foresight data and give a little comparison. And then I think I've got a pretty good idea of who I would recommend either one of these for. All right, now let's dive into the data here real quick, but I first want to talk about some of the feel aspect around this. And again, I'm trying to explain this as much as possible. The best way is to try to get a demo for yourself and feel them either out on course or in a bay for yourself. But to me, they were a tad on the firm side overall. Out of the center, you really, really do get a beautiful compressed feel, especially with that CB. That CB out of the center felt like you were melting the ball and it was just trampolining off the face, which we definitely saw in the data as well. But outside the center, when you do hit the clubs, you definitely have the feedback to know that you missed. What was kind of crazy was that I felt like the miss was worse than what I ended up getting. So that just goes to show that the industrial design and the overall dynamics of the club are very forgiving for the player that this is geared towards, which I would probably put myself in this category. I would maybe lean towards a combo set with the CB at the top and the MB at the bottom, just because I was shocked at how easy the MB was to hit, even at the profile that it exists in. But what was really cool to me was that feedback is something that players desire. Players at this level, they want to know when they mishit the ball, but just because they want to know when they mishit it doesn't mean that they want to see the performance degradation of the mishit. So really cool that they kind of worked that out. I do think a lot of that comes from the slightly, more old school-ish design, having a little bit more offset in a club like this. It's not something that's super traditional by any means, especially with modern standards, but having that little bit of increased offset in the MB and the CB, I do think actually helps a little bit with the dynamics of that head moving through impact and being just a little bit more forgiving than these packages might traditionally be, which is really cool and a testament to TA's years on tour. And again, bringing that old school style design with a little bit more forgiveness in mind into a modern design with a little bit more modern accoutrements. So let's dive into the data here real quick, because there's a couple of very obvious things that you guys might have seen when I was hitting, but there's also a couple of really unique things in here. And one of these applies to me on every single iron testing session I've ever had, where the MB for me is actually launching a little bit higher than the CB does. And for some reason, my player dynamics just do that. I remember last year when I tested the TC versus the CB in the 659s here at sub 70, it was the same thing. For some reason, the TC was launching higher for me. And that just goes to show that fitting is very important. I think for me, the smaller package heads, I feel like I can kind of get down a little bit more. So I actually think I'm giving it a more proper launch, where with something like the CB, in this case, the TAIII CB, I'm a little bit more shallow with those heads just because of that wider sole. To me, it just, I think mentally feels like I just can't go down after it enough, which also helps, lower that spin a little bit, which we do see. There is definitely an increase in spin with the MB, which is nice to see. I would rather the club spin. These are a little bit on the low end when we talk about the pitching wedge and the 7-iron, especially because they weren't quite getting up to the apex that I would like to see. That's something that I could change with a ball change or even a shaft change, but I really did like the numbers out of this. I think personally, if I was going to do anything here, just because of the distances that I'm seeing, I actually would probably just bend these back weak a little bit and bring myself closer to that 175 carry with the 7-iron. But again, I'm not going to complain that I'm hitting 5 irons 210 yards in the air. For me, that's not necessarily normal. You definitely get a lot of speed out of these irons, which is really, really cool. And then there is, if we look at ball speed real quick, there's a big speed difference between the two clubs. And this is where the idea of combo setting is nice, but it's also something you want to be very careful of, because if you were to combo these, let's say I broke this set at the 7-iron, I would probably have to weaken the CB 6-iron to make sure that I'm not creating a giant gap. We already have a 6-yard gap between these two 7-irons, so I can't imagine putting a CB 6-iron in here. That gap is going to get big. I mean, it's, if I add another 8 to 9 yards to that, we're talking a little over a club and a half, maybe 2 clubs even. So it just would depend on where you break it. I think this is something where a lot of players are probably going to go up to the 6-iron and then maybe treat the 5 and the 4 as more of a driving iron or like a T club. And in that case, you're okay at a lower spin and making sure that that ball has a little bit more speed at the top end there. But they do they are designed to go together, so if you wanted to combo set them, that's absolutely possible, and Sub 70 will build your clubs however you want to build them, so nothing to worry about there. You don't have to do any work yourself, which is really nice, but really cool stuff here from the TAIII lineup. I did not expect to like these as much as I did, if I'm being perfectly honest. Especially that MB. I was shocked at the characteristics of that MB. I mean, we're really close to that 5,000 spin number on the 5-iron, and that MB carrying at 206, and the deviation on course, you can see these last 2 circles here, was ridiculous from a center line dispersion standpoint, like just ultra consistent and really, really fast. And then that CB was just freakish. I mean, that thing just didn't ever want to land, which was kind of cool, especially for me. It's just wild. But really cool stuff here from Sub 70 team and the TAIII collection. Obviously, being able to work with somebody who has a little bit of tour influence and has been on tour and has had success on tour is a really cool thing for them to be able to do. So really good designs here. Definitely for the player that's looking for a little bit more creativity, a little bit workability, smaller package iron for sure. And then that CB, I think actually has potential to be, even something on the higher end of the single digit handicap scale, if we were going to generalize it, would be really, really interesting for players to try out. So again, really cool stuff. Thanks to Sub 70 for letting me come out and test these, KBS for supplying the shaft, Super Stroke for supplying grips, and golftees.com for supplying my awesome TP5X golf balls. We'll see you next time. I felt hammered. A little thin on that one. Oh, that's not going to do it, folks. We're going to ignore that in the data, but if you're watching at the end of the video, you saw me chunk one. Chunked to 173 though. That felt good. All right, moving right along. Oh, that felt really good. It sure does go a long way, doesn't it? Oh.